Welcome to the Betting Above the Rim podcast, episode 173. Today's date, August 13th. And let's get started with our tip-off topics with the biggest news in the last week in basketball. Let's start with Joe Missoula, who signed a well-deserved contract extension, multi-year extension, to remain the coach of the Boston Celtics. Obviously, Joe Missoula, in his first year, wins an NBA championship. And listen, last year was an interesting year, obviously, losing those two tough games to New York, games 1 and games 2 at home, after being up by 20 points in the second half in each game. And then obviously losing Jason Tatum with about 3 minutes left to go in game 4. It wasn't the ending that Boston was looking for as they were trying to repeat as champions. But it goes deeper than that. It goes to the fact that this Boston Celtics team is in a major overhaul because they didn't want to deal with the luxury tax implications. Jrue Holiday traded to Portland, obviously for Anthony Simons. You see the trade of Kristaps Porzingis being moved to Atlanta. You look at Al Horford, still remains unsigned. Luke Cornett signed with San Antonio. You bring in guys like a Chris Boucher, right, to maybe try to help the pivot. And no Jason Tatum this year. I wouldn't say it's a rebuilding year for Boston because I don't think they rebuild. I think this is a punt year. And good for Joe Missoula to get the financial security that he should have gotten for the job he's done at Boston since taking over for Ime Udoka. Congratulations to Joe Missoula on signing an extension with the Boston Celtics. Let's move on. Well, someone's getting extended. Now someone's getting bought. And that team being bought is the Portland Trailblazers, a team with a rich history going back to the days of Dr. Jack Ramsey and Bill Walton in the 70s. They were sold, and they're being sold to Carolina Hurricanes owner Tom Dunin for a valued price, according to Shams, of $4 billion. Remember, the Portland Trailblazers have been owned by former Microsoft executive Paul Allen. Paul Allen passed away. If I'm not mistaken, Paul Allen is also the owner of the Portland Timbers of Major League Soccer, and I also do believe the Seattle Seahawks. So he basically owned every team kind of up in that Pacific Northwest region. You know, when you look at Portland, like I said, this is a Northwest that's had a rich history. You know, Seattle Supersonics left and went and moved to OKC a long time ago. So they've had a footprint there. This Portland team should be an interesting team to watch, you know, moving forward. Obviously, with Scoot Henderson going into his next year, Jrue Holiday, obviously, we talked about before, coming in the trade. Jeremy Grant, let's see what's going on there. You know, Yang Hansen, who I was obviously big on in the draft, Donovan Clingan, young pieces. Chauncey Billups done a good job. They were really, really good that second half of the year. But the bigger news is not how they played the second half of the year. It's the 4 with the B. That's in $4 billion. And that's what new owner Tom Dunin is paying to purchase the Portland Trailblazers from the estate of the late Paul Allen. Let's move on to opening night. The NBA now, according to Shams and whoever, has started to release the schedule for the first week of the NBA season. Now remember, opening night of the NBA will take place on Tuesday, October 21st. Before I get into the matchups, just to give you guys a little bit of an update, just so in case you're not aware, this podcast, Betting Above the Rim podcast, it's only going to be once a week till about I think it's about September 29th. Then we will come back twice a week. We'll start doing 2 shows a week, previewing divisions again, have some guests, and then obviously use the podcast that will come out on opening night to give our our view from 5,000 feet above in regards to big picture, who wins the NBA championship awards, so on and so forth. But let's get into the matchups because that's all we care about really at this point. Not TNT, almost got tricked. NBC the new home of the NBA. I hope they bring it back. Opening night, doubleheader. Houston Rockets versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. Oklahoma City Thunder, the defending champions, versus the biggest threat to them in the Western Conference, and that is the Houston Rockets, who obviously just brought in Kevin Durant. And then the old guard, Steph, LeBron. Why? We don't know how many years we got of it left. And there's still two of the biggest names in the sport. So it makes sense to put the NBA champion versus one of the top teams in the league, and then put the two aging stars that are still trying to make one more run at a championship. So opening night, Houston, Oklahoma City, Golden State, Lakers. Now remember, the next two nights after that, it's going to pivot over to ESPN. And ESPN has started to announce, at least if I got this right, matchups on Wednesday night will be the Knicks and the Cavs, two top teams in the Eastern Conference, and then Dallas, San Antonio, Cooper Flag, Victor Wembanyama. So if you think of what the NBA did, first two nights in regard to nationally televised games, they go with the Western Conference top team versus the second best team in the West, two aging, older stars opening night. Second night, two top teams in the East, two of the emerging young players in Cooper Flag and Victor Wembanyama. We can't wait for October 21st for the NBA season to get started. One season that's well going on is the WNBA, and there was a trade that took place over the last week, and that's Aaliyah Edwards being traded from the Connecticut Sun from the Washington Mystics, I should say, to the Connecticut Sun. And with J.C. Shelton, two second-year players getting traded for each other. Why is this significant? Number one, Aaliyah Edwards goes back to UConn, where she was a star player, in Connecticut as a star player. Also, with the development of Kiki Iriafen, how she's looked in the rookie year, remember, she's probably that third person in the rookie year race behind Paige and Sonia Citron, but also Shakira Austin coming back. There just wasn't the minutes for Aaliyah Edwards. Now with Connecticut, they have Tina Charles, but Tina Charles is really at the end of her career. So there's an opportunity now for Aaliyah Edwards to go and get herself some playing time. When you look at Washington, they get someone like J.C. Shelton, who is a backup, who will back up Sonia Citron and gives them perimeter shooting, kind of get that depth, and another young piece for the Washington Mystics who have Iriafen, who have Sonia Citron. Georgia Moore comes back after the ACL tear. So that would be good news for them. Really quick to the college game. Something came out is that the NCAA decided not to expand the NCAA tournament from 68 teams to 72 or 76 for the 26-27 season. Thank you. You know why? Because when it comes down to the tournament, I don't want it watered down. I know the SEC was great. I don't need 15 teams in the SEC. Now, if you told me you're going to 72 or 76 and you're doing it to bring in another team in the Horizon, another team in the A10, another team in the Summit, if you were doing that, I'm all for it. But I'm not for putting more power teams in the NCAA tournament. People love the tournament for the upsets. Keep it at 68, and I wouldn't be minding if we went back to 64. Coming up next, we'll go into our award tours. We go into our Eastern Conference preview. We continue with the outlook for the Detroit Pistons, for the Indiana Pacers, and the Miami Heat. Three interesting teams in the East. We'll talk about that on our award tour after this commercial break. Welcome back to the Betting Above the Rim podcast, episode 173. And it's time to get into our war tour as we break down the future markets. As we continue our preview of the Eastern Conference, let's bring up our first team, and that's an intriguing one, and that's the Detroit Pistons. Detroit comes into this year with a win total of 44.5, minus 360 to make the playoffs, plus 250 to miss. An odds of 13-1 to win the Eastern Conference and 40 to 1 to win the NBA Finals. Detroit is such a tale of two seasons last year. 44 wins, awful first half. Awful. Like, couldn't get out of their own way bad last year. And then they make the move and obviously give the Knicks a really good 6-game series in which Jalen Brunson sent them home with that dagger from the top of the key. I am so impressed of what J.B. Bickerstaff does in the regular season. When you get to the postseason, that's a different story. But when it comes to the regular season, J.B. Bickerstaff does a really good job. Cade Cunningham, to me, has shown that I think he's a top 20 player in the world. I really do. He's so dynamic in his ability to score the ball, rebound, pass. You look at getting Jaden Ivey back, who missed the end of the year. Stewart, who obviously missed part of that playoff series against the Knicks. Jalen Duren gets a year older. Asor Thompson is a year older. I just think that in that division, there's certain teams you got to like more than the others. And I've talked about this before, that and we'll preview them when we get to them, but I'm just not big on Milwaukee. I think Detroit is the second best team in that division. So I am going to go over 44.5 wins for the Detroit Pistons. I think that they will get somewhere in that 47 to 49 win total and find themselves as a top 6 seed again in the Eastern Conference. Let's move on to a team that was one game away from winning the NBA championship, and you could argue, without an injury, may have won the NBA championship, and that's the Indiana Pacers. An Indiana Pacers team that won 50 games last year and is coming in with a win total of 38.5, plus 104 to make the playoffs, minus 138 to miss, 22-1 to win the Eastern Conference, 80-1 to win the NBA championship. We know what the deal is. Tyrese Halliburton is out for the year. Miles Turner was signed, and I can't wait for those games versus Milwaukee. It's as he signed with the Bucks. So how do you look at an Indiana Pacers team? If you look at the fact that the team we'll talk about next, Miami, had 37 wins and made the playoffs, I think the best bet to look at is Indiana, to make the playoffs at plus 104. They're not going to be a top 6 seed in my opinion. I just don't. I mean, if I write it down or talk to you right now, it's, I think it's obviously the Knicks. It's Cleveland, right? It's Detroit. It's Atlanta. It's Orlando. And then you could throw up who you think that six team is. I am banking on they're going to be somewhere 7 to 10. And I'm banking on that whoever Rick Carlisle is going to go against, he's going to have the advantage on the sideline. So you're asking me about a one-game situation. You got to take the better coach. And to me, we would talk about, and we'll talk about Miami in a second. If you start naming the top coaches in the NBA, I mean, I don't think you talk about Spo anymore because what happened with Miami. Probably talk about Ime. Probably talk about Ty Lue. I think you talk about Rick Carlisle, right? You got to talk about Mark Daigneault because his team won the title. I mean, do you still put Steve Kerr in that top 5? So if he's going against Chicago, Indiana going against Chicago, or he's going against Milwaukee, or he's going against any of these teams that are 7-10, 7-11, Radakovich from Toronto. I'm taking Rick Carlisle. So my bet's going to be Indiana Pacers make the playoffs at plus 104. Let's end this segment talking about the Miami Heat. Miami Heat won 37 games last year. Their win total is 39.5. I don't remember the last time I'm seeing this number so low for Miami. Plus 102 to make the playoffs, minus 136 to miss. 35-1 to win the East, 125-1 to win the NBA title. It's amazing how a team that was such a proud franchise for a long time, Heat culture. And we talk about Spo and how great of a coach Spo is and what Riley is. You know why they were great? You know why there was a Heat culture? LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh. That was the Heat culture. And they have not been the same since those guys, LeBron has left, Chris Bosh had to retire early, and then Dwayne Wade left, came back. Doesn't matter. This team's been a team that, although they made it to the finals a couple of years ago, they were an 8 seed. I mean, they beat Milwaukee, but, we can talk about Milwaukee all we want. Where has Miami gotten better? Look at the Southeast Division. Look at Orlando. Are they better than a team with Banchero and Wagner? No. Are they better than Atlanta with Johnson, with Trae Young, with KP? No. They're the third best team. And I'm more bullish on Charlotte than I am Miami. Miami Heat to miss the playoffs at minus 136. Coming up next, we'll go to our war tour to the Western Conference, where we'll look at the outlook for the Memphis Grizzlies, the Minnesota Timberwolves, and the New Orleans Pelicans. We'll be back with our Western Conference war tour after this commercial break. All right, so here we go. Segment number 3. Welcome back to the Betting Above the Rim podcast, episode 173. And it's time to continue our war tour now in the Western Conference. And let's first take a look at the Memphis Grizzlies. The Memphis Grizzlies team that won 48 wins last year comes into this year with an over-under win total of 40.5, plus 120 to make the playoffs, a minus 160 to miss it, and then obviously 50-1 to win the to win the Western Conference, and 100-1 to win the NBA Finals. It's such an intriguing team, but let's put it to you like this. Can Memphis go over 40.5 wins and make the playoffs? Yes. Will Ja stay healthy? Will Ja stay out of foul trouble? Not even foul trouble, legal trouble. Well, Triple J, who signed an extension and got hurt a lot. Can he stay healthy? Can Zach Edey, who's going to be reevaluated for his ankle injury, in a couple of months, will he come back healthy and last through the year? He missed time last year, right? Oh, Desmond Bane. You got to find someone to replace Desmond Bane and his shooting ability. Then you look at the other teams in the division that seem to be improved. San Antonio, Pelicans, obviously Houston, Dallas. So if I'm bullish on those teams, I have to go under 40.5 wins for the Memphis Grizzlies. Let's move on to the Minnesota Timberwolves, whose win total is at 49.5, minus 670 to make the playoffs, plus 400 to miss, 10-1 to win the Western Conference, 17-1 to win the NBA championship. Another team, intriguing because of, let's be honest, they're in the division of, I don't want to call it hell, but the division of death, right? It's them, it's Oklahoma City, and it's Denver. Those are like three of the top, 4 or 5 win totals in the Western Conference? So who can you be bearish on? When you look at Minnesota, they are fantastic. Listen, you can't say enough about the play of Anthony Edwards, right? They re-signed Naz Reid. Julius Randle was really, really good in the playoffs. They still have Rudy Gobert. Mike Conley's still a seasoned pro. But you can't be bullish, again, like before, on all 3 teams. Like, you can't be bullish on Oklahoma City, Denver, and Minnesota to all go over their win totals. So one of them's got to go under. I'm not taking a chance to go under. And I told you how I think about Denver. Under 49.5 wins for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Lastly, New Orleans, 29.5. Plus 880 to make the playoffs. Minus 30-1 to miss. And I don't even want to get into the odds to win the Western Conference or the NBA Finals because there's no shot of it happening. See that guy right there in that picture? That's the whole key. It's Zion. A guy that is untapped potential, dynamic, ferocious, can impact the game so many ways. But he's never healthy. Trey Murphy III, one of the best, to me, 3-and-D guys, I think, in the NBA. Herb Jones. Alvarado comes back. 21 wins. Can you get to 30? It's very simple. If Zion could play 65 games, this team's getting 30 wins. I mean, there's unless everything else falls off around him, and it could, there's too much talent with that kid and too much talent with someone like Trey Murphy III for me not to think that they're going to be better. It's simply put, if this team falls on its face again, either Trey Murphy III or Zion, one of them is getting moved at the end of the season. This has been your Betting Above the Rim podcast for August 13th. For all things sports gambling, download the Sports Grid app, pre-game, in-game, post-game, props, predictions, and more from the very best in the sports gambling industry. For my producer, Matty George, who always does a fantastic job, thanks for listening, folks, and always remember, it's smarter to be on Sports Grid. Good night.